What is the world and living beings made of? Is consciousness eternal? Can consciousness be shared? Is it material? Is it alive? Can technology ever see it? Is there a universal consciousness? Such questions and more will be addressed in this second episode of Consciousness Unveiled, in which we take a dive into the ultimate realities, the absolute realities which comprise the world and ourselves. Whether you're engaged in deep spiritual practices, contemplative practices of serenity meditation or insight meditation, or if you're studying the Buddha's teachings or just Dhamma in general, or even if you're a spiritual seeker looking for more meaning, looking for answers to the big questions, or even if you're just curious about the Buddha's teachings, about meditation, about consciousness, about tranquility, the Abhidhamma, in any of these cases for sure, is a source upon which you can establish the right view necessary to walk on the right path. Some even go as far as to say that life was not well lived without having learned the Abhidhamma. We'll talk about movie reels and balancing sticks and lighthouses and kings and their retinue. And in the end of this episode, I'll give you a question in the form of a riddle to test your knowledge. Let's go. So in the first episode, we discussed about, remember, the everything. The everything. Or maybe we could call it the all. In Pali it was atta. Everything that can be known by consciousness, by a fully developed consciousness, actually. No? So these attas, we divided them into mainly two sections, right? Hinattas, inferior attas, which are conceptual realities, which were subjective realities, depending on a subject, made by the mind, just concepts. Panyati is another word. And ultimate realities, paramattas. Paramattas, which we could translate as ultimate or absolute realities. They are objective, objectively real. They don't depend on a subject. And they are the constituents of the world and ourselves. They are real objects. They have true existence, paramattas. And we also discussed some means of differentiating these two. Remember, we discussed types of hinata. Some hinatas refer to things that are real, or refers to things that are real, and some refers to things that are not real. Not real, right? And means of differentiating, you might remember, is reduction was the main means of differentiating between what is objectively real, what is paramatta, and what is subjectively real, which is only a concept invented or created by the mind. So reduction, we reduce parts, reduce things into its parts until we reach the fundamental building blocks of such things. If during this process of reduction the object itself disappears, it is a hinata, it's a concept. It's not really real. And if it doesn't disappear, if we can reach the ultimate level, the absolute level of the building blocks of reality, and it's still there, then this we are talking about a paramatta. Now, on this chapter, we'll discuss about paramattas. Paramattas are divided into mainly four categories. paramatthas. I'll put the Pali word. I hope you're already familiar with it. Ultimate realities or absolute realities. They can be divided into four. First is consciousness. Second is mental factors. Mental factors. The third category is matter, material things. And the fourth, apart from all of these others, quite different from them, is an element, a reality called Nibbana. We'll discuss about these four realities, especially today on this side. And eventually we'll reach a little bit about Nibbana, and then we'll come back and focus in detail into consciousness. Now, this classification of paramattha could receive some more details, which will be useful for you. So, let me add in a different color. From this line to the left, we have conditioned phenomena. Conditioned realities. They depend on conditions for their arising, and this is why they are called conditioned phenomena. They do arise, they do exist, but they depend on a certain number of conditions to exist. They arise, they perform their own functions, and they vanish. These are conditioned phenomena, sometimes referred to as formations. Formations. The Pali word here is sankhata. They are formed. Sankhara could be formations. Sankhata, they are formed, conditioned. And on the other side of this line, we have this element. We use the word element sometimes to refer to realities, to these absolute realities. So, Nibbana is an element apart from all of these conditioned phenomena. It is an unconditioned element. Unconditioned, it does not depend on conditions. Unconditioned. Therefore, even though it does exist, it exists, it does not arise. It does not arise. It does not vanish. It is an eternal, constant, stable reality. The only one, the only single one that actually is a stable, permanent reality. Everything else in the world and in ourselves are conditioned formations, conditioned phenomena, conditioned elements. They depend on conditions, they arise, and they vanish. Now, another classification that will be helpful is that, well, this is material phenomena, that's quite obvious, and these are mental phenomena. Mental phenomena. So you have absolute realities which are mental, absolute realities which are material, and then you have Nibbana. Nibbana, this special element, could be put in a classification here together with consciousness and mental factors, together with Nibbana. They are called immaterial realities. So you have immaterial realities, some of them are mental and some are not. I mean, one is not. This is a single reality, actually. And we have realities which are material, and realities which are immaterial, and realities which are mental. Realities which are conditioned, and a single reality which is unconditioned. So now you have a little bit more understanding about these absolute realities. Now, let's focus on consciousness. Consciousness. In Pali, the word, you'll see it many times, so it's worth learning it, is citta. There are other words as well used for consciousness. Vijnana, for example, is another one. Mano is another one. But we'll stick to this one most of the time. So consciousness, in order to understand what consciousness is and define consciousness, which we're going to do in this episode, let's take a look back into something I have already introduced to you, which was like the flow of consciousness. We could call it the mental continuum. Continuum. Another word you could use is continuity. That's another word. Another one is a mental stream. So these are some English terms for this continuity of awareness, of cognitive processes. In Pali, this word, it's worth learning. I'll always give you the Pali as much as I can for you to learn these basic words. Mental continuum is called chitta, you see. You already know this word chitta. Santati. Santati. Another word would be santana also, but chitta santati is the standard for mental continuum. So this mental continuum is like a movie reel. It actually could go infinite. It is infinite to the past, but we don't say infinite to the future. We don't say infinite to the future because, here I'll give you a brief answer, even though this is a little off topic. As long as there is craving, which in Pali is tanha, as long as there is craving, there will be more and more, this continuity of consciousness will remain, will continue existence. So I'll put as existence. So as long as there is craving, there will be existence. So the future, we don't say is infinite because craving can be removed. Craving can be removed and existence put to a halt. So it is not infinite. But as long as there is craving, it will continue. So in the past, we can say for sure, this movie reel goes infinitely to the past because there is no first condition. There is no element which can arise without prior conditions. So we have this movie reel, I call, just to represent the flow of consciousness, the stream of consciousness. And we had this, in this unanalyzed picture of the mind, many states that we can ordinarily see in our life. For example, we have awareness. Awareness. We certainly have perception, for example. Perception. Different individuals will look at the same objects and have different perceptions of it. And even our own perception may change over time. So perception. Another is feeling. Feeling is also present in the mind. Sometimes it's a pleasant feeling, sometimes we have an unpleasant feeling. Other states that are always there. Attention, for example, is another one. Just some examples. And even with ordinary observation, we can see that there are states of mind that are not always present. For example, greed is not always present, sometimes it's present. Or hatred. Or even bright states such as wisdom does not occur all the time in the mind, occurs occasionally. Or compassion, for example. So this is the unanalyzed picture of the mental continuum. Now, looking on this level, it may seem like one continuous, permanent state of awareness. But with further analysis, the Abhidhamma gives us, shows that this is actually not true. Now, this continuous flow, if a little bit further analyzed, will appear a little bit like this. We'll have what is called root consciousness, root consciousness, which is a subtle consciousness that occurs, for example, during sleep, occurs uninterruptedly during dreamless sleep. And it occurs also when we are, for example, unconscious, when what we call ordinarily, when we lose consciousness, for example, unconscious. This root consciousness takes its place and occurs uninterruptedly. And it also arises, you will see, between what are called mental processes. So this root consciousness is like the foundation state of our consciousness. And in this state of consciousness, no different objects can be taken. The act of seeing cannot happen. So in order to see, in order to hear, in order to think, in order to meditate, this state of root consciousness, this subtle state, must come to a halt. So here we see that consciousness is not one single thing. We already start seeing in greater detail. And we see that mental processes do these particular special actions. The action of seeing, for example. Seeing objects, hearing sounds, or thinking, meditating. These are done in this mental process in which more powerful consciousnesses occur, taking different objects. So this mental process occurs, does its function, performs its action, and again, root consciousness takes over, maintaining the life. This root consciousness is actually also called life-continuum consciousness. Life-continuum. It maintains life. It is there whenever you're not seeing, hearing, thinking, and so on. It is there occurring uninterruptedly until a mental process occurs. So, and then again, another mental process will occur, for example. Another mental process will occur. Now, some Pali words here. Root consciousness is called mula chitta. Mula is a root, mula. Mula chitta. Chitta you already know, is consciousness, right? Mula chitta. Or bhavanga chitta. This is life continuum. Bhavanga chitta. The factor of existence, life continuum. Mental processes are called chitta, as you already know, this word chitta, viti. Chitta vitis are also important to understand the process of cognition. So on this level, we already have a little bit more information. We see that our process of cognition has some different states. I would compare this like those electrocardiograms, when we see like the heart at rest, and then we see some activity, and again the heart is again at rest. So this foundation, this moment of rest, is maybe comparable to the root consciousness, which arises in between mental processes. And the mental process is like these moments of activity of the heart in which the heart is able to perform its function of pumping blood, right? So it's a bit, could be correlated, could be not correlated, sorry, could be compared in this way. So now we can go a little bit further. This mental process that we had, and which interrupted the flow of the root consciousness. Root consciousness, we had a mental process, and again, this flow of mind continues with root consciousness. Root consciousness, and so on. So, in order for the mind to process a new object, to do these special actions of seeing, of hearing, of thinking, of meditating, several processes actually have to occur even within this mental process. So if we further analyze it, this mental process is actually constituted of mind moments, individual mind moments. And not only them, but also this flow of root consciousness is also constituted of mind moments. We'll see more later about the laws that govern mind and how a conscious moment cannot last forever. It lasts for a certain period of time, which is fixed. So this continuity of consciousness, of this process of cognition, is constituted by individual moments of awareness. Because each moment of awareness can only occur, this is a moment of awareness, we will call it a mind moment. Mind moment. In Pali is called chitta, you already know this word, kana, chitta kana. A mind moment, or a CK, a chitta kana, can only occur if the previous mind has vanished. So, this means that one moment of consciousness, I'll take any of them, one moment of awareness actually occurs. I'll represent the arising of consciousness like this. It doesn't go up, it's an immaterial thing. It doesn't go up, but it arises, it occurs. This is just a representation. It lasts for one chittakana, a period of time during which it performs its function and then it ceases. Because this phenomena of consciousness, of awareness, depends on conditions which are limited, which have a limited capacity, which are impermanent. So consciousness itself is also impermanent, also has a limited capacity, and also must pass away. If consciousness did not pass away, then the process of cognition would not occur. You would not be able to see objects if root consciousness didn't pass away. You would not be able to think about what you saw if the process of seeing did not pass away. So the passing away of consciousness is essential for the process of cognition to occur properly. So this, as soon as one consciousness ceases, next consciousness, next conscious moment, next chittakana occurs and passes away. So we have this continuum of mental dhammas, of conscious states that arise and pass away due to conditions. Now, if we zoom in into one of these mind moments, zoom in into one of these mind moments, like the frames of a movie, like an individual picture of the overall film, we would see that, because now at this level, it looks like it is one conscious moment. Of course, this is all a representation only. These are immaterial things. We cannot draw consciousness. But this individual mind moment, at this level, without further analysis, looks like one reality, one single thing. But upon analysis, we'll see that there is what we call chitta. There is chitta, there is awareness. Awareness is there. But there are also other realities which are part of this moment of cognition. And consciousness cannot, by any means, exist or occur or arise by itself without the help of some certain other dhammas, other realities, other mental realities, and including an object. So what is consciousness? Here we can approach the definition of consciousness. What is consciousness? What is citta? Consciousness is, let's put the question here, what is consciousness? What is consciousness? Consciousness is that which is aware. That which is aware. That which cognizes. That which knows. Or that which sees. Cognizes, knows, aware, is aware of an object. So consciousness necessarily depends on an object, you see. This object is not a material object necessarily, it can be a material object, but as we discussed before, all attas are objects of consciousness, or can be objects of consciousness. So these objects of consciousness, we'll discuss a bit more about them, but they can be classified in many ways. So consciousness is that which is aware of an object, that which cognizes an object, that which knows an object. It's an immaterial Dhamma, an immaterial reality, immaterial phenomenon that occurs seeing an object. This is the definition, the basic definition of consciousness. So, because consciousness is that which is aware, we can call it awareness. And because consciousness is that which cognizes, we call it consciousness. That which is conscious of an object. That which knows an object, we could in a way call it knowledge, but this word is used for another reality, which understands objects deeply, which is knowledge, which is wisdom. So we're not going to use knowledge as referring to consciousness itself, but consciousness can be said to know the object on a very simple and bare level. And consciousness sees, so consciousness is the seer of objects as well. Now the word cognition, in this case, even though citta is consciousness, is certainly a very important, maybe the most important factor in cognition, this word cognition I'll use to refer to the entire process of cognition of an object, which includes several mental functions, which are not only performed by citta, by consciousness itself. So we can call citta mind, we can call it awareness, we can call it consciousness. And consciousness depends on an object. There cannot be awareness without there being an object to be aware of. There cannot be knowing without the object of knowledge. There cannot be seeing without the object, that which is seen. So the object is necessary in this overall picture, in the overall existence of consciousness. So consciousness always takes an object, always cognizes an object, always sees an object. It always inclines to an object as well. So consciousness could be compared to a stick. A stick that depends on a base and that inclines and depends on a wall, for example, for it to stand. So this stick is like consciousness, and for it to stand, it must incline towards an object. So consciousness will be cognizing the object, and consciousness depends on the object for it to stand, for it to exist. It also depends on a material base, but this I'll introduce a little bit later. Now, if we have to take an overall look into kinds of consciousnesses, consciousness could be divided in several ways, actually. We have a total of usually 89 consciousnesses, or also 121, a little bit more in detail. But they could be divided, for example, according to several factors. For example, consciousness divided according to the feeling that accompanies it, according to where it arises, we call bhumi in Pali, or according to its nature, jati. According to its nature. Nature means, for example, if it is a wholesome consciousness, wholesome, or if it is an unwholesome consciousness, if it is a functional consciousness, functional, or if it is a resultant consciousness. These are the four. You don't need to keep this in mind. It's just an overview of this section. Consciousness could be divided in several ways. So we're gonna actually the bulk of this first chapter of the Abhidhammatta Sangha is concerned with classifying consciousness. So we're gonna learn how to classify consciousness in 89 ways and in 121 ways together. Now, consciousness, as we've seen, depends on an object. Now, the object of consciousness, we use this word object. The Pali is arammana, or also alambana. It's quite close word. Arammana is the object of consciousness. Now, what are the objects of consciousness? Actually, we have already seen them. All attas, all realities, or the everything can be object of consciousness. So the objects of consciousness are also infinite, actually infinite. Hinattas, the concepts, are objects of consciousness, or paramattas are also objects of consciousness. Now, paramattas, remember we have divided them into consciousness itself, consciousness. So consciousness can be the object of consciousness. And we have mental factors here. They can also be the object of consciousness. We have matter, material things, can also be the object of consciousness. And even this special, unconditioned element, nibbana, can also be the object of consciousness. Now, consciousness can take anything as object, as we can see. But it does have, by natural law, some limitations. One consciousness, one single consciousness, can only take either a hinatta, a concept, as an object, or it can take, remember here we classify these as conditioned realities and unconditioned realities. So it can take one or more conditioned realities. Or the one and only nibbana, the unconditioned element. Okay, so this is unconditioned. This means that if the mind takes nibbana as object, then it is not taking conditioned phenomena as object. It could take one or a group of conditioned realities as object, or it could take a concept as well. So these are some of the limitations that consciousness has. Now this applies to every single consciousness, no matter how developed it is. Even the Buddha's consciousness, with his full development of consciousness, he could take any atta without difficulty, but his mind is also comprised of these mental moments, these mental processes, and they all must obey what we call dhammatas, natural laws. So here I'll include you one more principle called Dhamma Dhammata. What is a Dhammata? Dhammata refers to the laws, natural laws that govern realities. Natural laws that govern realities. They are natural because they are not made. They are not created. They are not created by God, for example, by a God. They are not created by the Buddha himself either. The Buddha just understood them and explained them. They are not created by monks either. They are not created by anyone. They are natural laws. They are laws that govern how phenomena work. Here in this case, we're talking about the laws that govern consciousness. So the ones that govern consciousness are called, again, you see chitta, this word you know, and niyama. Chitta niyama. These principles that govern how the mind works, how mental phenomena in general work. For example, we have learned a few of these principles that consciousness arises and it must pass away. Consciousness is that which is aware of an object. It depends on an object. And consciousness lasts a certain amount of time. Now, these natural laws that are not made, that occur naturally, they just, let's say, they occur due to necessity. Not the necessity of an individual, but the necessity of phenomena. In order for phenomena to work, this is called, we could refer to this as the doctrine of necessity. So these dhammatas occur in this way due to necessity. If it wasn't so, things would not work. Consciousness would not work. If consciousness didn't pass away, then the process of cognition wouldn't work, and so on. So these are dhammatas, which govern the laws that govern how consciousness works, how matter works, and how mental processes work, how the mental continuum work. The subject of whether consciousness is material or not. Many people nowadays, scientists or neurologists, psychologists, may hold the idea that consciousness is a material thing, that consciousness can be maybe simplified to maybe impulses in the brain. Normally when we talk about consciousness, or when you see talks about consciousness nowadays, it is usually actually about the brain, not actually about consciousness. So consciousness, I'd like to introduce a few facts over here to clarify this, to establish a few principles, to cut through this noise of confusion about consciousness, and to establish a few important principles for the development of consciousness, actually. So is consciousness material? Is consciousness material? Is consciousness the brain, for example? Is it just impulses in the brain? Now, the Buddha, this wasn't a very important question at that time. This was quite established that consciousness was not a material thing. How could material things be aware? How could material things be conscious? So it was quite clear at that time. But we could bring a few arguments to support this principle that consciousness is an immaterial reality. If consciousness were material, then we would probably expect it to be limited to the five senses. But consciousness can do much more than that. It can take past objects. It can create ideas that were unheard of. It can find solution to problems that did not exist. It can take, even if further developed, consciousness is strong enough to even take future objects and objects in the past far long ago, even beyond our present life. Consciousness is able to experience material things, and consciousness is able to cognize and experience immaterial things as well. For example, when you remember a feeling you experienced in the past, in a way you are taking a past immaterial object. Material things would not be able to do that. Another argument, which is difficult to prove, but the Abhidhamma teaches us that there are types of living beings which are possessed of consciousness, but no material body. They are possessed of very fine and refined mental states. These are called immaterial beings. And they have no material base, no material body whatsoever. But they do have states of consciousness, and they are possessed of life. And another thing is that, you see, material things actually cannot, are unconscious. They cannot take objects. So I'll put it as, they do not take objects. Material things do not take objects. They are called anarammana. It doesn't mean they cannot be taken as object. They can be taken as object for sure. Even when we are seeing things, when we are hearing things, consciousness is actually taking material things as object. These processes will be discussed further down in the series. But the only phenomena here, the only paramatta which can actually cognize, which can actually take objects, are consciousness and mental factors. And they work together to create this process of cognition. So is consciousness material? Definitely not. It is an immaterial Dhamma, and it is a mental Dhamma. It depends on conditions. It arises. It is closely connected to the body and dependent on the body. We'll discuss that consciousness a little later, but consciousness actually in most types of existence consciousness relies on a material body, relies on a material base. Word here is vattu, material base. So consciousness is not the body, but they are closely connected, to some extent interdependent. So if the body is damaged, is hurt, yes, that will certainly affect consciousness to some extent. If the eye, the material base of the eye is hurt, is damaged, then the eye consciousness, the consciousness that relies, that has the base, that has the eye as a base and takes visual objects, would also be impaired, would also maybe even not be able to occur. So there is some interdependence between mental and physical, between mind and body. There is certainly some interdependence, but they are not the same thing. So Buddhism, in a way, is a doctrine of duality, in which you have material things and non-material things. So under this topic of consciousness being material or not, which we have hopefully already established as not material, that's actually a very important principle for the spiritual development. If consciousness is material, then death is the end of it, and there is no way of developing yourself. So then the entire of the Buddha's teachings would have almost no meaning, would have almost no benefit, only very present benefits. For example, a little bit more peace of mind, and defilements would arguably be impossible to eradicate. So this is a very fundamental principle in your right view, which is the foundation of your spiritual practice, of your spiritual development, is that this belief that consciousness can be developed, consciousness is dependent on conditions, and these conditions must be past. These conditions cannot be present. So it comes from conditions from past lives, and it can be developed, and it can be purified, and it can be, in a way, liberated. So can technology ever see consciousness? Well, technology is material things. So technology may be able to give us some insight in how consciousness affects the body, for example. Or it may give us some more indirect understanding of consciousness. But material things, even very developed technology, will never be able to actually cognize, actually see consciousness. Because matter, material things, do not take objects. They are not conscious, so to say. A little further down the road, maybe today or maybe in the next episode, I'll give you a few, like a chart of like an analysis of types of living beings, what types of living beings we can find. And you will see that material things, they can be they can be either living or non-living, while consciousness can only be living. It can only be a part of an organism, a living organism. So material things do not take objects. The only realities which can take objects are consciousness and mental factors. So consciousness can take other consciousnesses as an object, or consciousness can take other mental factors as objects, or consciousness can take material things as object, or consciousness, if developed and purified, can one day see the goal of the teaching, the goal of the Buddhist practice, the self-development, self-mastery leads to Nibbana. So this is one of the reasons why consciousness is so difficult to see. Difficult to see, suddhuddhasang. Suddhu, very difficult to see. Suddhuddhasang, chittang. Sunipunang, sunipunang, very subtle, very difficult to see. Very subtle is consciousness. Sunipunang. Yattakama. According to its wishes, according to the flight of its thought. Nipatinam. It goes here and there according to its wish. Consciousness. Yattakama nipatinam. Chittang. Rakketa. Protect. Medhavi, the wise. The wise protect or guard the mind. Chittang rakketa medhavi. Chittang, the mind. Guttang, that is protected. The mind that is protected, the mind that is guarded. Sukhavahang. Leads to happiness. This is a verse which occurs in the Dhammapada. It's a Dhammapada, number 36. You can check if you want. Dhammapada number 36. So this verse was uttered by the Buddha when he was living in Savatthi, the city of Savatthi. Nowadays, I think we call it Sarnath in India, northern India. He was living there in Savatthi, and there was a banker at that time, a rich man, and he had a son. Now, his son was very pious, and he was following instruction, following the guidance of a Buddhist monk. And then he asked this monk, Venerable Sir, how can I be free from this suffering of rebirth? And then the monk started giving him some advice. Okay, practice charity. That was the first advice. Then he was eager to follow this advice, to be free from the round of rebirths. And he started practicing charity. Even a third of his wealth he gave in charity. Later on, he asked the monk, so what should I do next, Venerable Sir? And then the monk gave him another instruction, further instruction. Please take precepts, take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Avoid the 5 precepts, avoid killing. Precepts against stealing, avoid sexual misconduct, avoid lying, avoid intoxicants. And then he undertook these precepts and practiced them, these 5 precepts, the foundation of morality. And then after all, he came back again to this monk and asked, Venerable Sir, what should I do next? to be free from suffering, from the suffering of samsara. Then the monk kept giving him further and further instructions. Okay, take the 8 precepts, and then take the 10 precepts. Eventually he told him, okay, now you should ordain, renounce your possessions, and ordain as a monk, and dedicate yourself fully to this practice. Then he ordained as a monk, and now as a monk, he started being taught the Abhidhamma, this higher doctrine that we are discussing, that we are investigating in this series. And he was also taught, as all new monks, the Vinaya rules, the Buddhist monastic code, all the rules that monks, bhikkhus, have to follow in order for them to develop properly, and for the sangha, the community, to withstand the test of time, and to be able to overcome difficulties that may arise. So then, being shown all this material of Abhidhamma and of so many rules, moral virtues that he had to follow, he felt overwhelmed, and he felt like he wanted to give up. He wanted to disrobe. Then his companions took him to the Buddha, and the Buddha, understanding the situation, told him, if you're overwhelmed by all this, can you do just one single thing? And he said, yes, Venerable Sir. What single thing should I do? And he said, you should guard your mind. So that's, maybe we could boil down the entire practice laid down by the Buddha as protecting, as guarding the mind. Because the mind is very difficult to guard. Suddhuddhasa is very difficult to see. It's very subtle. And it goes here and there according to its wish. Yatta kama nipadina. So he says the wise protects or guards this mind, and this guarded mind leads to happiness. So now we've seen that consciousness is this immaterial mental reality that occurs due to conditions, that it arises, it takes an object, it cognizes an object, it is aware, it knows, it sees an object, which can be of a variety of objects, and it performs this function of being aware of this object, of taking this object, and then it vanishes, giving rise to another conscious moment. So we've discussed that. But consciousness is a little bit like a king. A king never comes alone, even though a king has many functions, right? Many duties. So this is just a crown to represent the king. So a king, he's unable to do his kingly duties, kingly tasks, without some amount of help. So in the same way, consciousness, this is like consciousness. Consciousness also depends on, let's say, a certain retinue, a certain following, a certain entourage of mental factors. These are plural, you see, factors. Consciousness, it is actually only bare awareness. It is just, it barely knows the object. It simply takes the object. It doesn't do other necessary functions for the process of cognition to occur properly. For example, it doesn't particularly feel the object. It doesn't investigate the object. It doesn't understand deeply the object. It doesn't invigorate the mind to perform these functions. It doesn't pay attention to the object. It doesn't concentrate the object. It doesn't attach to the object. All these other functions that we even ordinarily experience in this process of cognition are done by different mental dhammas. They are mental factors. So in the next episode, we'll discuss about the entourage of the king and how they occur together with this king to help him perform his kingly duties of being aware, of cognizing, of knowing, and of seeing an object. So to conclude this second episode, I'd like to test your knowledge. So I'll give you a question in the form of a riddle, and the answer is within this episode. It's within the information that we have discussed during this episode. And it goes like this. In dreamless sleep, uninterruptedly, unseen, like a hidden root I lie. I must depart for you to see. Life has in me a foot, who am I? So you can try to answer this question, and I'll leave the answer on the description box below. So in this age of information and communication and also distraction, I'd like to congratulate you if you have spent and dedicated your time to listen to the Dhamma, to listen to this Abhidhamma, and to dedicate yourself to try and understand these sometimes difficult concepts. But during this time, for sure, I'd like to tell you that some very wholesome minds have certainly occurred. Sometimes faith occurs, sometimes understanding occurs, especially in Abhidhamma discussions. Understanding occurs. Sometimes we may be able to overcome wrong ideas that we may have held for a long time. So all this accumulates wholesome minds. Wholesome, we'll discuss more throughout this series, hopefully, about how this process of accumulating wholesome merits happens. So I'd like to, as we do traditionally, share this merit, share my merit with you, and share my merit with all beings, and for you to share your merit with all beings as well, and thereby accumulate actually more merit. When we share merit, just this wholesome intention actually doesn't reduce the merit you have accumulated, it actually increases. And it helps other beings who may listen to that, who may hear about what you've done. They may rejoice in that and thereby accumulate merit themselves. So it's a way of helping others. So let's now finish with a verse, the verse that I discussed previously, the Dhammapada verse, and with a verse to share our merits in order for you to attain your spiritual goals, to attain happiness not only in this life, but to attain also good destinations after death, and hopefully to attain Nibbana as soon as possible and put an end to the round of rebirths, which is suffering. Suddhutasang sunipunang yathakama nipatinang cittang raketa medhavi cittang gottang sukhavahang idang me punyang asavakkayavahang hotu idang me punyang nibbanassa paccaya hotu mama punya bhagang sabba sattanang bhajemi te sabbe me samang punya bhagang labhantu.